Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping the first issue of Absolute Martian Manhunter. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. John Jones is spiraling. The world around him is literally fracturing, with coffee mugs and debris suspended in a chaotic yellow-hued void. His internal monologue is a frantic, existential question, and as someone catches a glimpse of his true, alien nature, the horror is just beginning. John is completely detached from his surroundings. As a voice tries to reach him, he's lost in a philosophical spiral about the duality of human nature. His perspective shifts again. Now under medical care with his head bandaged, the same intrusive questioning continues, probing the thin line between healers and murderers. John's wife, Bridget, tries to get through to him, but he's already miles away. He's stuck on the mystery of human connection, completely unable to ground himself. The world dissolves into abstraction. John's internal experience isn't just confusion anymore. It's a total sensory overload, as he struggles to process the most basic communication while his mind fractures. John Jones sits in a doctor's office, clearly detached from the conversation. The doctor reviews his scans, noting a light concussion and some brain swelling, and advises him to take a couple of weeks off. He warns John to watch for symptoms like visions or confusion, ultimately calling him a very lucky man. John's mind snaps back to the explosion that nearly killed him, the word lucky echoing as he relives the blast in a flash of blinding, destructive light. Back in the present, John ignores the doctor's dismissive comment about his wife waiting outside. Instead, he pulls out a cigarette, his face bandaged and his expression completely vacant. The doctor catches John lighting up and demands he stop, confused by the sudden appearance of smoke. But as John stares ahead, we see the thought smoke, a swirling, multicolored manifestation of his fractured psyche that the doctor can't possibly understand. John and his wife, Bridget, walk out of the hospital. John is already fixated on the secrets of the people around him, noting that the doctor who just cleared him for duty is distracted by his own failing marriage. Bridget is horrified by the lack of professionalism John describes, especially given that he just survived a building explosion. She can't wrap her head around why he's being pushed right back into the field, but John just dismisses her concern as part of the job. As Bridget presses him on his detached attitude, John's perception fractures again. He literally sees the reflection of his wife's distress in his own sunglasses, a jarring reminder that his alien senses are completely overwhelming his human life. Bridget pulls John into an embrace, desperate for his presence. She needs him, and more importantly, she needs to know their son, Tyler, is all right. John remains distant, barely registering the details of their home life or the upcoming therapy appointment for their son. He offers a hollow, distracted, "Good, that's good." Bridget pulls away, expressing the painful reality that John is a stranger in his own home. She simply says, "I miss my husband." John's mind fractures into a memory of a desert camping trip, a vision of a lonely fire and a father's voice. As his thought smoke begins to bleed into reality, John stares at a lighter, clearly dissociating. He promises Bridget he'll talk to his supervisor, but he's already checking out, trapped in his own internal, alien sensory nightmare. John is back at the FBI office, but his sensory overload is already peaking. A coworker paints her nails with a vibrant, distracting pattern while John struggles to filter the noise. His superior delivers the news. John is being placed on administrative leave immediately. John's internal monologue begins to spiral, fixating on the fundamental mysteries of human nature. John is urged to take a vacation and spend time with his family, but he barely seems to hear the suggestion. John insists he is fine and wants to work, even as he distractedly eats, his mind obsessing over the thin, blurry line between a law enforcement officer and a criminal. His colleague Newell tries to press him on a few questions, but he's quickly shut down by their boss, who insists John needs time to recover. John's thoughts turn dark, reflecting on the mundane routines of everyday people. As Newell is told to back off, John's perception fractures completely. He visualizes a person going through their normal morning routine, only to suddenly transform into a suicide bomber, revealing the terrifying, violent potential he sees hidden in everyone around him. John is clearly not in the right headspace to be at work. He tries to argue that his 12 active cases are too critical to leave behind, framing his return as a professional necessity rather than a recovery step. His supervisor pushes back, questioning if the comment is a threat. John coolly deflects, calling it an assessment. John reminds them of their mission at the Stochastic Terrorism Task Force. There's a moment of intense scrutiny as his superior asks if he's truly back to normal. John insists he's fine, but the office atmosphere is thick with tension. His boss eventually relents, admitting the office is too small to sideline him if he's that determined to work. John reiterates their core purpose, predicting threats and stopping violence before it happens. His boss sets a hard boundary, ordering John to stay away from the coffee shop investigation and everyone involved. He clarifies that it's Agent Newell's case and John is only a witness. John quietly agrees, though his expression is completely blank and detached. John stands before the ruined Paco coffee shop, musing on the futility of his job. He compares his work at the Stochastic Terrorism Task Force to a carnival psychic, a business built on guessing what's hidden and just about as accurate. He kneels near the police tape, reflecting on the fundamental barrier between people. He realizes that no matter how hard he tries to analyze a suspect, he can never truly know someone the way they know themselves. But then, the thought smoke flares. John suddenly knows exactly what his colleague, Agent Newell, thinks of him, that he's cold, distant, and tellingly, that Newell calls him the Martian when talking to his wife. The realization hits him like a physical blow. The labels Martian, distant, different, and alien swirl around him in a chaotic wash of colors, confirming his deepest, most terrifying suspicions about his own nature. John stares out from the shadows, his face partially obscured, finally accepting the truth he's been fighting. He simply whispers, "Yes." John is back on the job, standing in the wreckage of the coffee shop, searching for patterns in the debris. He's looking for those classic warning signs that his task force is trained to identify. He begins his interviews, starting with the bomber's mother, Mrs. Miller. As she speaks, John's alien perception, the thought smoke, intrudes, revealing intimate, irrelevant details like her lifelong hatred of pickles. He continues his questioning with a witness, but his mind is flooded with more private history. He learns about a secret summer romance between the bomber and his best friend, a memory they never shared with anyone else. John's investigation leads him into a restroom where he finds graffiti on the wall. He's still looking for surprising behavior, but the mundane nature of the vandalism contrasts sharply with the intensity of his internal experience. He stands in the dark, bathed in the yellow glow of his own internal sensory overload. He's searching for cries for help, but everything feels distorted by his alien biology. Finally, he talks to the bomber's neighbor. As she tries to answer his questions, the thought smoke reveals she's hiding her habit of daily cannabis use, leaving John to navigate a world where everyone's secrets are laid bare. John Jones continues his desperate search for meaning, pointing at the wreckage as he tries to impose order on a world that feels increasingly fragmented. His investigation hits a wall of pure, explosive intensity. He's looking for a logic that simply isn't there, trying to find a pattern in the chaos of a blast. John's face is bathed in a harsh, alien light as he confronts the core of his misery. He realizes that the very definition of his work, stochastic terrorism, is just a fancy way of saying everything is fundamentally, terrifyingly random. Finally, his internal barrier breaks. As he lies on the ground, overwhelmed by the colorful, swirling thought smoke of everyone around him, he has a haunting realization about the people he's trying to understand. They're just trapped, burning themselves up to find a way out. John is completely detached from his own life, arriving home to a house he barely recognizes, despite having lived there for a year. Inside, the distance between John and Bridget is palpable. He admits he feels like he's going crazy, but when she asks how he's feeling, he just shuts down with a hollow, "Fine." Bridget tries to bridge the gap with a simple, domestic exchange, but John is clearly miles away, his mind drifting into something far beyond their suburban kitchen. His perspective fractures entirely. He isn't just looking at a knife and a cutting board anymore. He's perceiving abstract, alien memories of living music and quantum foam, completely losing his tether to human reality. Bridget, unaware of the cosmic horror unfolding in John's mind, only sees his detachment. She calls his colleagues monsters for keeping him so late and reminds him that their son, Tyler, is still awake. Bridget nudges John to check on their son, Tyler. John enters Tyler's room, still struggling to ground himself in reality, and asks what he's working on. Tyler shows his father the clay figures he's been crafting, asking if they represent his parents. John praises the work, but his mind is clearly elsewhere. He stares at the crude clay figures and asks, "Where am I? Where's Daddy?" A chilling sign that his sense of self is evaporating entirely. Tyler looks up at his father, his expression turning from innocent curiosity to concern as John's detachment becomes impossible to ignore. John's perspective finally snaps. The room dissolves as he perceives a monstrous alien entity looming over them, forcing his true, non-human nature to the surface. John lies awake in bed, his blue-tinted skin stark against the dark sheets, while his wife, Bridget, sleeps peacefully beside him. He is clearly unable to rest as his mind fixates on his internal turmoil. His alien hand reaches out into the void, surrounded by swirling, vibrant colors of thought smoke, a visual representation of the intrusive, non-human memories he can no longer suppress. In a series of close-ups, John stares at the ceiling, his eyes wide and haunted. He poses a rhetorical question to himself. highlighting the futility of his struggle against his own physiology. John's internal monologue reaches a grim conclusion. The more he tries to block out his alien nature, the more it consumes him. He imagines himself standing outside in the night while Bridget remains in bed, unaware of the transformation happening right next to her. John is already deep into his deception, clutching a hospital waiting ticket while telling himself he needs to get to the office early. He sits in a crowded waiting room, surrounded by people whose internal noise is clearly overwhelming him. He tells the office he'll be late, trying to maintain a shred of his professional persona. John remains motionless in the sea of strangers, his internal monologue focused on keeping up appearances so no one worries. His mind suddenly fractures, pulling him into a vivid, high-contrast memory of his first firefight alongside his partner, Sutri. John stands isolated in the center of a dense, buzzing crowd, his face showing the strain of trying to process the overwhelming sensory input of everyone around him. His perspective shifts entirely as he fixates on a line of faces, each one representing a distinct, colorful, and intrusive echo of the people he's trapped among. John sits in the exam room, but his mind is racing through clinical trauma lists, aortic dissections, and shattered pelvises as he tries to process the medical environment. The doctor dismisses John's physical symptoms as mere stress, oblivious to his own internal breakdown. While he speaks, his own secret thoughts of being at his breaking point bubble up in the thought smoke. John is completely overwhelmed by the psychic noise. The doctor's presence is a cacophony of sweat, exhaustion, and madness, and John feels like his perception of reality is on the verge of a total collapse. John, clutching a cigarette, stares ahead with dead, hollow eyes. He manages a weak, hollow reaction to the doctor's diagnosis. John Jones sits at a kitchen table, questioning the mother of a suspect named Mike Miller. He's using a flimsy excuse about medical tests to justify his presence, pressing her for any insight into her son's actions. She immediately denies any wrongdoing, insisting it's all a mistake. As she speaks, the eerie, colorful thought smoke begins to leak from her head. John observes the smoke pouring out of her like a cartoon, his own internal monologue fracturing as he struggles to reconcile the grieving mother before him with the reality of her son's case. She continues to defend her son's character, recounting his routines, the Sunday visits and the frequent calls, while the psychic smoke intensifies around her. It's a tragic, surreal display of her internal distress. John, now fully caught in the psychic feedback loop, inhales the vibrant, swirling smoke of her memories and emotions, drawing the essence of her grief directly into himself. John is completely lost in the psychic feedback loop. He inhales the colorful thought smoke of Mike Miller's memories, visualizing the boy's first day of school, filled with a raw, overwhelming sense of love and potential. The memories continue to flood his mind, vivid, painful flashes of Mike picking birthday flowers for his mother, contrasted against the devastating moment he learned his father wasn't coming home. John realizes the weight of that trauma. He recognizes that it was the mother who had to break that news to her son, a realization that seems to anchor the psychic storm for a brief, heavy second. The psychic intake becomes too much for John to process. He violently coughs, physically expelling the mental residue as the sensory overload forces him toward a complete breakdown. John Jones, completely overwhelmed by the psychic noise, stumbles away from the interview. He needs to escape, desperately trying to clear his mind. His perception fractures, forcing him to relive a stranger's memory of buying a first home, hearing a real estate agent call it a real fixer-upper lot of potential. John continues to cough, physically reeling as he wanders through the city. No matter where he turns, the colorful ribbons of thought smoke follow him, saturating his vision. Another intrusive memory hits him, this one darker, a father finding cigarettes under a mattress, leading to the ominous, unfinished thought, where there's smoke, there's. The psychic pressure culminates in a blinding, internal explosion of color and light as John's grip on his human persona finally snaps. John's perception of reality continues to unravel. To him, the city is no longer just people. It's a living, breathing tapestry of multicolored thought smoke pouring off everyone from librarians to construction workers. He collapses in the middle of the street, physically choking on the psychic fumes. As he gasps for air, he can only see the people around him as if they are literally on fire. Despite John's violent, colorful breakdown, the world keeps moving. He notices the most unsettling part. Nobody else seems to notice or care about the psychic inferno he's trapped in. John is completely lost in the psychic noise. The thought smoke isn't just abstract anymore. It's a chaotic barrage of mundane human concerns, barroom chatter, office politics, grocery lists, and fragments of memories, all swirling around him in a blinding, multicolored mess. He tries to make sense of the sensory assault, struggling to grasp why these ideas are literally oxidizing in the open air. He's physically reeling, coughing as he tries to process the overwhelming input. Suddenly, the noise shifts. A new presence emerges, a cool green voice cutting through the chaos. It's calm, almost hypnotic, offering a simple instruction to breathe. John is paralyzed by the realization that this voice has a color. It's green, and he can see it as clearly as he can hear it, even as he continues to choke on the psychic fumes. He realizes he isn't just suffering from an overload. There's something else out there in the smoke, something that's been waiting for him all along. John Jones is completely unraveling as his alien perception consumes his reality. The world around him, once familiar, has morphed into a surreal alien landscape where even basic human objects like fire hydrants and street layouts have lost all meaning. He feels a constant, terrifying presence trailing him, and as he desperately tries to find a moment of peace, he realizes that the very reflection in the mirror has become a mystery he can no longer solve. John is completely losing his grip, his mind fracturing as he experiences reality from outside his own body. He is terrified, pleading, what's happening to me?" while his perception of the world shifts into bizarre, hidden dimensions. He tries to flee the sensory overload, running blindly through the streets. Even a local police station, a place that should be familiar to an FBI agent, has become an incomprehensible alien structure that he cannot make sense of. As his body struggles to process this transition, he is racked by a violent, hacking cough. The world around him dissolves into a chaotic, psychedelic blur, and he is left gasping, "What is this?" as his true, Martian vision begins to take hold. John Jones is reeling, his hands pressed against his head as a disorienting, psychedelic psychic noise floods his vision. He desperately tries to identify the source of the intrusive thoughts, only to receive a cryptic, dual-voiced reply, "You, me, we are talking." A single word hangs in the void, acting as a mental trigger. "Remember." John's mind fractures further, pulling up a specific, traumatic memory of a man on fire or a human flame, a stark contrast to his current disarray. The memory detonates in his mind, showing an explosion that mirrors his own fragmented state, while he continues to cough, struggling to breathe through the overwhelming psychic smoke now clouding his perception. As the vision recedes, John is left in a state of hollow confusion, whispering to himself, "What waited?" as if finally realizing something ancient and dangerous has been hiding in his subconscious all along. John's fragmented memory of the building explosion is interrupted by a disembodied voice. It insists his survival wasn't a miracle, but rather something else entirely. As a strange green form manifests in his vision, the voice claims credit for his continued existence. John, appearing bandaged and entirely disoriented amidst a swirl of psychic color, asks the entity what it is. The voice replies with a cryptic, rhythmic list of purposes. John's face goes blank as the alien presence takes control, commanding him to look and finally remember the truth of his origins. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today. Do you believe John's psychic awakening is a path toward his true identity or a dangerous mental trap set by an ancient, manipulative alien force? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.